Gordon, send more house to save the house. Come on, the house!
Yeah, absolutely. Dooch, anything you want to talk about on the build-up? Talking about that year when Blez broke the record and how he felt.
I was just really interested in that captaincy point, actually. Gary, I don't know how you felt about captaincy as you were developing as a player, but I have this theory that perhaps a lesser light in a cricket team would make a better captain because they've got more time to think about everybody else. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that. I'm not saying that you're a lesser light particularly, but compared with somebody like Blez or even Jez.
No, you'd be true if you were saying that anyway, Joe. But no, I think it's a valid point because I think we touched on it. I can't remember his podcast about demoting yourself and things like that. Exactly what Blez was saying there, and you can look around teams in the Lancashire League, and there's been some successful teams where the best player in the side or the captain, was one who was scoring 500, 600, 700 runs or taking 40 wickets, and genuinely would have been in that side quite naturally anyway. I think it's interesting there because I think you can get some good captains who contribute a lot and don't necessarily put themselves under a great deal of pressure to be the main star. I mean, a lot through the 90s when I was playing first team cricket, there was so much pressure on Blez to get runs. It was phenomenal. One of my questions, cut this in whenever, but one of my questions was going to be, at what point did Blez transition from feeling that pressure, because he must have been there week in, week out, of getting to score the runs. And even then, some people were talking about, do you fancy being captain, when it was chopping and changing a couple of times, to the point where you become, I can play my game because I've got 3 or 4 other quality batsmen in the team who can contribute as well. But on the captaincy from Joe, I think we agreed the other night. Absolutely same thought process there. It's a lot. It is a lot.
It's difficult, and people from the outside looking in might look at that period where there was various captains coming out, and Blez was head and shoulders above everyone else. I would, for those people who say that, or maybe want to ask a question around it, where would we have been if we'd have lost 20% of Blez's runs as a result of him being captain? That's what's got to be thought about. And if it's not the right thing to do, then it's not the right thing to do. So no, I really appreciate your honesty there, Chris, around that. And I didn't realise that it was university, because you'd made a few sandwiches that you didn't.
Cakes as well. Cakes as well.
Cakes as well. You had to buy some scones or something. Joe Martin, we've got 5 minutes left. Anything before we go on to the next topic?
No, I don't think so. The only point I was going to make was that, Blez, you captained a few games later, maybe late 2000s, 2008, 2010. I can remember you batting yourself at 11.
Yeah, I remember that.
You were scoring 600-700 runs a year, at that stage, and one game you batted yourself at 11.
I've been Jez's vice captain for maybe one of Jez's years, and I think the year I did that one, I was Charlie's vice captain. Luckily, whilst Jez and Charlie were when I was their vice captain, I didn't have to do it very much. That day at Bake Up, we got a scratch pro whose numbers looked good, and he wasn't very good, was he, Joe? Really, I can remember just thinking, it's the end of the season. Charlie had cried off quite late. I think he was working. We had a lot of young lads who hadn't had a go, through that year. So I just thought, let's give them a go. Let's, bat them up the order. And as sometimes happens, they didn't do very well. I ended up, rather than being unknown at the bottom, as he was, I had to actually go out and bat. That was just end of season itis, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah.
A couple of things in there was the pro was Ian Daniel. Well bowled, Ian. And Tiffer ended up keeping wicket, I think.
Yeah.
Shambles, Blez.
He came into the dressing room at the end of the game, Jez, and said, and I won't do his accent, but he said, "Thank you very much, lads." He was a Sri Lankan called Ian Daniel. He said, "Thank you very much, lads. I've really enjoyed today. You're a great set of lads. And if you ever want me to do it again, I'd love to." Nope.
You got duck and non-for.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. So, Chris, we've chatted a little bit about the type of player you were in your early years, and then we'll get to the 1990 season when you're still only 23 at that time, and I do remember, I played quite a bit in that season, and the weather was was half decent, and our previous record at the club was from Stephen G. I can't remember what year it was, mid-70s I would imagine, and he got 804, and that year, Chris, you got 857 runs, which is a phenomenal achievement from an amateur of that age playing cricket, at Lowerhouse. And I know we keep going on about it, but it's a fact. The pitches weren't great. You got runs at home and you got them away from home. Just give us an insight into that season, how it started, what good memories you've got, what stories you've got around that season, if you don't mind.
I'd had a few 50s before that in the first team. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, but they'd only just been 50s, 51, 52, etc. They weren't big scores. It seemed difficult in that age. People weren't scoring hundreds, every other game. Amateurs weren't getting hundreds quite as much. Although they did that season, there were quite a few decent amateur scores that season. I just remember the second game of the season getting 90 at Enfield. It was one of those days where I thought I could actually get a first team 100. I got to maybe 85 with like an over to go, and thought I was still in with a chance of getting 100. They had a sort of like an old gnarled seamer called Bramwell, John Bramwell. He bowled the last over, needed 15 for a century, and I think I hit the first ball for 4, so I thought, I'm in with a chance here. The second ball, he sort of like just short of a length ball. I thought I can pull this over pavilion. I went to pull it, and it stuck in the mud, and jumped up, and it hit me on this. I'd gone through it that early. It hit me on the side of the jaw.
Right.
And I don't think I was concussed, but I couldn't speak afterwards, and I felt a bit dodgy. And I got a single off the next ball, and then didn't face any more balls. I'm quite happy not to face any because I didn't really know what was going on. So I ended up with 90 not out, and I thought 30 in the first game, 90 in the second. It's a good start, and progressively I did all right. Big score towards the middle of the season. I got a couple of 80s, and things started going up, and started then getting somewhere near a record I knew nothing about. I'd never even looked at Lowerhouse's amateur batting record. Never even thought that anybody get anywhere near 800 runs for Lowerhouse, because that never happened. Standing here getting 500 a season seemed like once in a blue moon, although it was more. As it got later on in that season, I got closer and closer to it. And I probably was within about 50 or 60 of the record with about 4 games to go. Something like that. We played Haslingden away. That was Matt's debut when we got skittled for 50. So I didn't get many that day. Maybe 9, something like that. Then we played Bake Up, and I got Roger Harper got me out for about 3. From needing 60 off 4 games, I needed, virtually the same off 2 games. And I must have got maybe 20 the game before that. So I still needed 30 or so to break the record the last game of the season. And your Matt said to me, Blez, it was football season then as well, because we'd started playing football on Saturdays. And he said, right, we're not staying in. There's no way we are staying in Saturday night. We're playing football, then we're out in town. All right. you've stayed in the last 3 weekends, you're not staying in. So we had a few pints at Belvedere. As per usual, you were in 2 rounds, I was in 1. You probably went home, and Matt dragged me into town. About 10 o'clock, we were falling over outside the Swan, and thought, "I've got to go home, Matt." I said, "I won't be able to see, let alone play cricket if we carry on any longer." So I went home. Game day arrived, sort of like almost give it up really, because I was wanted to do it, but if you start thinking, "Oh, I've got half a chance of getting it today," you might stumble over anyway. So I just sort of cleared it from my mind. We batted first. Colin Miller needed about 3 wickets to get his 100 wicket to do the double. And this, you're going to ask me about this later on, about Stan and his running. That was Delroy's last game. He had 800 runs. Delroy Morgan, Stan Eaton go out to bat. Last game of the season. Delroy Morgan run out none.
Yet another podcast and yet another Heaton run out non-incident. I mean, it cannot be coincidence. It simply cannot be coincidence. Stan, if you're listening, what are you playing at?
Just to jump to Stan's defence.
No Stan defence, Joe.
Or I was going to say, he always says it was up to the other players to learn how Stan ran, as opposed to Stan learning how they ran.
The pro's got 800 runs, last game of the season, before hopefully going to open the test batting for the West Indies, and Heaton's run him out for none. So I walk out to bat, Heaton's out for none. So we might have got a few extras or not, but we're 2 down, for zip. Miller, I was talking to Joe about this earlier. Miller was bowling sort of away swingers in those days. He got in the test team as a funky off spinner with dodgy hair, but he was bowling swingers. He bowled sort of like decent pace and big outies, and odd one that came back in. And our great friend is at first slip, Brian Payne.
Yeah.
And his son's at second slip, playing one of his first, probably not his first game in the first team, but one of his first games, having had a stellar sort of junior career and played for England's schoolboys. He was at second slip. And I was about 2, and I flashed at one off Miller, and Andy dropped it. He spilled it. He was a difficult enough catch, but he dropped it at second slip. So I was on about 5 or 6 of them. And sort of like after that, I just forgot all about it. I got a bit of a reprieve, and I got to 30 quite easily after that. Broke the record to get to 30, and then I got 83, something like that, to finish it off, to put the record a little bit further forward. By that time, you'd heard about the record, and it was a great great occasion to do, great little achievement to have, and really pleased with myself. Obviously, the day went downhill from there. They knocked it off probably with about 5 or 10 overs to spare.
A lot more.
Ended up a lot more. Colin Miller just kept whacking it out of the park. Would he probably hit it even further? So we walked off. I broke the record. We got beat again. Stan had run out another probe and none. So nothing much changed really.
And Blez, just to add,
I think there's a good point in there, because I played that game and it was great to witness it, Blez. It was a fantastic knock. I think, but I was out middle order and we were 30 odd down. I think when I was, and that was 5 down. Yeah. And you were still a long way from any record. And I think then, I think there were probably only a couple of other people put doubles on, but I think it was Jez. I think you and Jez put a best part of 100 on. I think that, and you got most of them. And I think that's where, so a bit of a nod to Jez there, just to sort of see your own elder statesman.
Jez got 17. Go back to Jez.
Underrated batsman, Jez. Definitely underrated batsman. However, his captaincy at Rottenstall did sometimes leave a bit to be desired. As one game when we went over to Rottenstall, we always had a good drink after the game at Rottenstall, And one day we went across and it had rained a bit. You know, he probably had wet the cobbles on the banking. And they were probably quite slippy going down the banking. And Jez got there, and their captain either was Payne or he was Payne was in the captain's ear saying, it's not fit this, Jez, is it not fit this? We can get it bar for 1:15 if we call game off. Jez calls the game off at 1:15. At 2:30, we're sat outside their bar in shorts and T-shirts and cracking flags. Jez will deny that, but that is the truth. It was a lot wetter than it seemed.
Blez, all I would say is it was Bob Holmes there, Captain.
Yeah, even more chance of that.
Just looking at that scorecard, I do remember that game, and it was Miller was just it was bowling, it was like swinging it around corners. And me and you put 90 odd on. I batted for a while together, but we put it. So there's a lot to come out of that game. You've got the record, which is obviously the pinnacle, and that is so important for the club. Gary's got a duck middle order. Tariq Sadiq's playing for them, Blez, the lad who played for Burnley. We had a couple of run-ins there.
Well, you did in your role as an officer before.
Iggy's playing.
As Stan used to say. Stan used to say, there's no better than a shit fast bowler.
That's right. And before Joe Martin brings it up, he's obviously given me a bit of praise there, getting a 90-odd partnership. I've gone for over 6 and over. A little bit over, but look at Marcus G, 2 overs, none for 29.
29.
Yeah. And I think you'll see a footnote on the scorecard saying that was Marcus G's last game.
So we've started off with it's a pinnacle. Blez has got the record. He's done so well. The night before, he's out with my youngest brother who won't go home. He's causing a right nuisance himself. MD Hope, not out 2, bats 11 and don't bowl. So there we go. That's fantastic, that, Chris, and that it has stood for a long time now. Are you a little bit surprised it hasn't been broken?
I've said in the past that I thought somebody like Vishal probably would have broke it had he stayed for any length of time. Hassan could, if Hassan had a couple of good seasons, a good sort of summer, I think Hassan could have broken it. I thought Will might, when Will came, I was surprised. Will did okay when he came in 2008, but I thought he might have. Johnny, when he got to 2015, I thought if Johnny kicked on, he would get it, but obviously has gone away proing and paid amateuring, and then has come back to us. So I think Johnny's got a fair chance. I thought Ben might have when he started off that season with the 170. I thought that that could have been a year when it went. Yeah, I am surprised that it hasn't gone because, by today's standards, it's not. I don't think it's a massive score. It's big enough. Yeah, but I don't think it's massive.
No, I agree. It is. And again, I don't want to sound old and back in our day, but it probably 700. Now would be equivalent to 857 then. But what's your thoughts, Joe Martin, about the players we've got and and Blez's achievement there?
I completely agree with everything that Blez has said in terms of which players could go on and break his record. I do think it'd be extremely difficult now for 2 reasons. We play fewer games. We only play 22 games, and there are no replay dates either. So, the games are going to get called off.
And the standard of the league's better because, whilst we're in the top division, the standard of the league's stronger.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The standard for the last, is it 2 years, Joe? We played.
No, we only played split 1.
Played split 1, haven't we? The standard last year, the standard of the teams we played against last year, certainly for the first 3 quarters of the season, was was right up there. I think, maybe the pros aren't as titled as they used to be, or as much of a greater reputation as they used to be years ago. But I think the amateur sides that we played against for the first 3 quarters of the season last year were as tough a cricket as I've seen played in the Lancashire League. Again, towards the end of the season, when teams are getting close to relegation, and things are going a bit skew-whiff, that some sides sort of gave up or didn't perform as well as they perhaps would have done at the beginning of the season. But I thought the standard last year was fantastic, and it might be a little bit more difficult to break that record now.
Sorry, I wasn't getting into the age-old debate of what is it better now or is it worse now. I just meant in terms of, because of the split, you're not batting against the worst team in that particular league at that particular time, as you would have done back in 90 when. I'm not saying you scored your runs against bad teams, but I'm just saying there's probably less easy runs to be had now in the split, since the split, than there was previously.
There are always sides, 3 or 4 sides maybe at the bottom who get the wrong pro, or the pro goes home, or they've lost they've lost players that were better, and there are easier runs to achieve in the seasons before. I do think now, and you are quite right in saying that, both Joes, that I think it will be tougher now to do. You'll have to get on a roll very quickly, and it's going to be tough with a standard as it is at the minute.
Yeah, it is a good point, because I would always thinking, as Blez has mentioned, those players that are there, the quality, and, they are capable, all those players you've mentioned, with Ben getting that 170, you can see that there's some game, because of, watching the way the international and county games changed, that people are more aggressive. But great points, Joe Martin, lesser games, and you're right. And I think the amateur bowlers, certainly in the top league, you've got better depth in amateur bowlers than you used to have when me and Blez played, in those 90s.
Well, I think that's a product of the rule changes, actually, by the fact that pros, previously pros could bowl 25 overs or 23 overs when it was 46 over. So, a captain could literally put a pro on from one end. I think me and Joe have discussed it before, actually, on the podcast. Captain could put a pro on from one end, and then they've only got another end to worry about. So I think the depth has to improve, otherwise you're going to really struggle.
Yeah. Can I make one point, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joe Martin, is there any chance of getting Gray to put 50p at meter?
I'll just put the big light on. Sorry.
It looks like daylight over in Devon, and yours it looks like midnight.
Well, it's just in case anything controversial happens.
Put the big light on, Joe. So that a fantastic 15-20 minute that Blez, and it deserves every second of it, of what you achieved in that season. Looking on slightly lighter notes around what's gone on in previous podcasts, we've got he's almost a resident guest now, Stan Heaton comes on. We have Stan's stories, he reads from the diary, and there's going to be more of that to come, listeners. But it certainly wasn't criticising you, Chris, but he was getting a few digs in about a certain innings where he, in as many words, said you denied him his one and only century. Can you remember that game?
I can remember it very well, and I think Gary's made the point earlier that Stan's infamous comment about there's nothing better than a really shit fast bowler, and we had one that day, and I don't want to mention his name because it's a bit harsh, but Church had one, a young lad who thought he was lightning, but he wasn't. And again, you can't see the scorebook to see exactly what I was on. You can only see the end of the tail, that I got 30 not out and Stan were at 83 not out. I don't quite know where the likelihood of Stan getting 17 before I got my 33. I could have been 10 not out, when Stan got to needing 17. You know, so there's a bit of license there. But I do remember the over that I won the game. I probably hit him for 4 fours in a row, and possibly the first 4 was the one that meant that Stan couldn't get the 17 to actually win the game, and that's when I smirked at him. And after that, the chance of him getting 100 were slim anyway. I probably hit the next 3 for 4 and won the game and walked off.
So when maybe listeners and maybe some of the hosts on this programme thought Stan was gilding the lily a little bit with, and he kept smirking at me through his left eye, you actually did give a little smirk.
I did. I think when I hit the 4 to mean that he needed 17 and there were only 14 to get. Yeah. And Stan used to say he flailed them over point for 6. Well, rarely is what I say to that.
So, Chris, that was 1994 that year when you denied one of our greatest ever batsmen his one and only century. He then talks about you unfortunately being run out for a period of games after that. Can you remember what happened then?
Yeah, I was in the past. I've had a recollection in my mind that I got out for 5 golden ducks in a row, and Stan was involved in 3 runouts in that period. But I've since looked at the scorecards and it's not true. It just must have felt like 5 golden ducks. The 3 runouts in a row are true. There were 3 runouts. There were 3 runouts in a row. I think the first 2 were as normal end of innings sort of running hell for leather and trying to get in and not getting in and weren't a problem. But the one at Burnley, he sold me right under the bus. He hit one straight to somebody, called yes. He set off. I had to respond because he was, it was in my younger days. He was sort of like senior pro. I got halfway down, keeper had took bails off. And 3rd time in a row I got run out. That time definitely strolled down the river. I stood and stared at him and threw my bat on floor, which is never great. Never great at Turf Moor, is it, to then have to pick your bat up and walk off, having got run out again by Stan.
Brilliant. And it's clear that Stan was responsible for all 3. That's what you're saying.
No, I don't think I don't think he was responsible for all 3. That might be taking it a touch too far. Right, certainly the last one.
We'll cut that out. We'll cut that out, Jez.
Yeah. Right, brilliant. Is there any questions around Blez and the running outs of Stan before we move on from you 3?
Well, I've been involved in numerous run outs with Blez.
All right, tell us some.
Each time I've been run out. There was one infamous one at Rishton. My cricket helmet at the time.
You were batting with a German First World War helmet.
Yeah, the nib at the top of the helmet had a spike on it. So I set off, Blez called it, I set off running, and Blez always runs down the wrong side of the wicket and turned blind, and Stan always makes a point. How long has Blez played? And he always turns blind. So I set off, head down, running as fast as I can. Blez will testify, I'm not very fast. I'm probably the slowest in the team, actually. And then suddenly, there's an almighty crash as I run into Blez. Obviously, there's only one real winner. I'm run out. I've spiked Blez in his stomach. And I've asked him if he needed a tetanus jab due to my rusted helmet.
Fantastic. Yeah, good lad. Good lad. Anything, Joe and Gary?
Charlie says you used to run him out as well, didn't he? He used to have a dig at you for running Charlie out as well.
Well, young lads getting in at 7, 8 and 9, it always ends up getting run out, don't they? I mean, one person who never complains about getting run out is Paddy. Because Paddy always tells the tale of, Paddy's a great cricketer and he's had first 11 50s before, but he never had a league. He never had a league 50. No. And I can't remember who we were playing. Can you, Joel?
I'll find out now.
Playing down at Lowerhouse.
Yeah.
And Paddy, we were batting first, and Paddy got to 47 with what I thought was 2 overs to go. So I'm at the non-strikers end. Paddy's at the strikers end for the penultimate over. Paddy misses the first 5 balls completely. Tries to hit him to the moon, misses them. Final ball of the over, 2 overs on the scoreboard. Final ball of the over, Paddy goes for another almighty swish at one, and he gets an inside edge down to fine leg towards the old pavilion. Now, we're playing quite far up the top. We haven't got anybody stood there at fine leg. So I'm thinking, Paddy, what's he doing? He's we still need to get some runs here. He's missed the first 5 and he's inside edge one, and he's got to 49. I'm not having it. We could have run a 3. Technically, we could have run a 3 to get his 50. But I sort of took it a bit easy, got a 2, and said, right, well, I'm going to have first 3 goals at the last over. Then I'll give Paddy the strike and he'll get his 1 to get his 50. So we get in. Paddy's looking a bit flustered. I don't know why. I meet him halfway down the wicket. I said, don't worry, Paddy. I'll get you on strike the next over. As I'm saying that, umpires have walked in from square leg, picked bails up and walked off. Gainer's not got the overs right, and it was the last over. Paddy's finished 49 men out. Obviously, since then, he has got his first league 50, so, I do feel a little bit better about it.
You didn't run him out, Blez.
I didn't.
It was against Accrington in 2016. At that stage, Paddy was the third highest, or had the third most appearances as a Lowerhouse player without scoring a 50. I mean, Pat wasn't that happy, but I found it terribly amusing.
I bet. So, Chris, you've done so well in getting the runs you've got at playing for one club, which is a fantastic achievement. You know my thoughts about people playing for various clubs and flitting from one to the other. Throughout that time, when you're constantly getting 500, 600, 700 runs each year, playing in a decent side, but not necessarily winning maybe the trophies you deserved, were you ever approached or offered to go and play at any other clubs during that period?
I think I had a bit of I did have an inquiry from Paddy about going pro in there for one season. An inquiry, saying, do you fancy proing? To which I said no. I didn't play cricket to make money. I didn't play cricket to get paid for it. I saw cricket as a recreation, from working, something to enjoy, something to socialise with my, close friends and, whatevers. And I never really wanted to be a pro. I didn't think I'd do particularly well at it either. So I never even, give it a thought. I just said no straight away. And,
right.
Nothing more was said, really.
Right. There must have been amateur clubs. I remember a time when Peter Sleep used to mither you to death about going playing for him.
Yeah, they always threw down the little comments when you were speaking to him in the bar at the end of the game. Have you ever thought of doing it? Have you ever fancied doing it? Come and play for us. And it was just shut down. Quickly. No, not interested really. There was nowhere else I would go to. I would want to go. I'm fairly happy in my own little world, in my own little community, and didn't really want to move really. So I was quite happy, where I was. Yeah. I'd love to have played. When these people were asking, I'd love to have won things and been involved in league winning sides and cup winning sides when they were asking me. And we weren't sure whether we were ever going to do that. Thankfully, we did, and it's made it all the sweeter that happened at Lowerhouse. No, never really gave it much thought at all.
That's interesting, that, because you would imagine that there would people be clamouring for you. Dooch, is there anything? Have you any observations around that?
I was just going to ask you, because I know you. We discussed about you, not on the podcast, but separately about you as well. I just wondered if you'd tell us about your approaches?
Yeah, I do remember quite vividly. Peter Sleep used to get into Blez's ribs, and we were having a pint after one game, and he would be chatting away to us, and it was like almost an afterthought. You know, Blez, have you thought about it this year? Come down and play for us, and you can bring your mate Jez with you if you want. That was as close as it ever got in Lancashire League. There was Stand. I think for the first or second year I got 50 wickets. Stand came in and were told, apparently they came to watch me and thought they were going to offer me some money to go as a paid amateur type of thing, which was a real honour. And I remember thinking, crikey, I wonder what's going to happen there. They spoke to me afterwards. I didn't, what should I do? Like, Blez, I want to play there. But the decision was made for me because they never rang me back. So no, that was it really. And again, this, in the current cricket arena, there is a lot of toing and froing and swapping around, but it wasn't the same when me and Blez were in our early 20s of swapping clubs around.
No, Joe, I didn't get any offers, Joe. No.
I was just going to ask, guys.
Thanks for asking.
I just had your name written down next on my piece of paper.
I got plenty of suggestions, but no offers.
We established the other week, Chris. We poached Gary from Burnley.
Yeah, listen to that. I can remember Gary because I played cricket against Chris more than I did Gary because Chris my age.
Yeah.
Because you're a year older than me, aren't you, G?
Yeah.
So I played more cricket against Chris when we were at school because that's only when you played each other. So, and I can remember Gary playing at Lucas because with the sort of like connections we had with the players who played at Lucas. I can remember Gary playing and was pleased when he came down to us at the Lowerhouse, after his time at the Ribblesdale League as well. So yeah.
So we'll move on from the approaches from various other clubs. Chris, you've played. We've established here. You've played for 37 seasons, and there's, I don't think anyone could count the amount of pros that you've actually played with and against. Is there any pros? First of all, maybe that you played with that have left a lasting impression on you, and also played against. What's your stories around the professionals?
You don't need to say about Ryan and Macca. They were fantastic players, fantastic people. Macca had a great cricket brain right from the day that he walked into the dressing room. Ryan, as Joe was rightly said when he wrote out that Ryan made you feel $1,000 every time you stepped over the line. You didn't need to take a backward step when you had Ryan in your side, which was always something that we never really had. We didn't have that sort of attitude. But when you had Ryan on your side, you had that attitude straight away. It was almost easy just to follow. So, those go without saying. Francois, fantastic club pro, brilliant lad, great moaner, and brilliant for the club. You can't miss out somebody like that. Also, when you look at your pros, but probably the pro that did most for me and my batting was Martin van Jaarsveld, just because he talked to me about preparation for batting and preparation for batting during the game and preparation for batting during the week. And, I think things have moved on massively in cricket coaching since about that Yarra sort of era. I think, before that, cricket coaching was, even perhaps at the international level, was only in its infancy. You listen to, some of these stories of these pros on lockdown videos, and they were saying, you only had a team, Mike Atherton saying you only had a team manager and a physio when he first started, and how it built up during the 90s, to having, big coaching staffs, and how people were training the brain to do various things as well as technique. We never had the facilities down at Lowerhouse to actually do any focused practice. But Martin came in 1999, and he sort of he took the practice wickets out of the question. He just wanted throwdowns. He was the first person who did proper throwdowns, other than my dad doing it from when I was, old enough to hold a bat. We'd go out on the field if it was wet, if it was dry, it wouldn't matter. He didn't want to have a full net. He just wanted somebody to throw him 100 balls and him play the shots that he had in his mind for the next game. He'd talk to you about who their pro was. He'd talk to you about who their bowlers were, and he'd just get me to throw down what they were bowling at him. If it was a spinner, off spinner, he'd want me to bowl that. If it was a left arm spinner, he'd want me to try and somehow turn it away from him. And he practiced the shots he was going to play during the week before the game. And he talked about how you're going to get runs against certain people, where you're going to pick singles up. And he was the first sort of pro who actually talked to me about thinking about the game rather than just doing what we'd done, which was play yourself into form.
Yeah, I mean, it was, Chris. I do remember the times where he would almost, take over a game on the Thursday night practice, and he would talk to us about how we're going to do this and how he's going to bowl. And you look at his stats as fantastic. Did he do that individually with you, or did he do that with other players of lesser ability?
I think he did it with me more than anybody else, because perhaps he knew that I wanted to learn and wanted to talk to him about it, and could give him feedback that he trusted about other teams as well as what he was doing. I would say personally he did it more with me than anybody else. Whether he did it with others on a particular regular basis, I wouldn't really know. I probably would say no. I probably say it was more me he did it with, and not exclusively me, but 90% with me, I would suggest.
Yeah, we finished fourth in that first season. I mean, and I remember going back, Gary, you played quite a bit in there. Yarra got over 1,200 runs that season. Blez, you over 700 runs, and Nicky had over 400 runs. And yet we finished fourth. Can you remember much about that, Gary? You only played a handful of games, but can you remember much about that season?
Not a lot, really. Like say a handful of games, but I think I did net regular and the like. And what Blez said was it was really different to see. It was unusual because it's not what you'd expect a professional to come in and do, sort of thing. Well, not what we'd have professionals who did. So that was unusual. Yeah, he sort of turned the net round, and instead of bowling, he was hitting into the net, wasn't he? He was driving. It was metronomic. Yeah. And he would do it and practice those drills and just obviously get the feel and get it mentally and muscle memory, everything right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He was, as his stats show there, and then going on to play at Enfield and doing as well as he did at Enfield. What about pros you played against, Chris? Tell us a few stories about some of those.
You probably remember your good games against the the real top names. The 250s against Alan Donald were something I treasure. I really, it was fantastic pitting your wits against somebody who was still in his pomp at that stage. That was well known throughout the world as one of the best fast bowlers, and you got A, the chance to play against him, and B, getting 250s against him was something I'm really proud of. Yeah. I know Nicky's not quite so proud of getting out to John Seedle against him, but
yeah.
So like I talked a little bit to Joe Dooch about it, about good spinners, sort of probably not the world renowned spinners. I can remember playing in my early years, Murray Bennett at Ramsbottom, who was like a sort of left arm spinner for Australia. And he played a few test matches in the 1985 series. He didn't look much like a cricketer. Had sort of like dark sunglasses almost every time he bowled. But he was a fantastic spinner, and he got me out cheaply twice. And but I just thought, what a mastery of the art that he had as a left arm spinner. Playing against Shane Warne, getting 70 in a team that contained Shane Warne. You know, probably only got 4 or 5 off him, but intentionally. But you know, got 70 against playing it. That was one of Gary's dad's greatest ever chances. He came off, and you know, like my school report, you tried hard, failed miserably, and he just went after him, which was funny. You know, all the big names. Disappointed that we never played against Viv Richards. I can remember the game at Lowerhouse being completely torrentially rained off. And by the time we played them towards the back end of the season, he'd gone home. So disappointed never played against him. Didn't play against Steve Ward twice. I missed him because of university. He came back and we'd played Nelson twice. So missed him. Generally, I'm sure all the, you know, the best pros around, you know, were fantastic. Didn't like much getting battered by batters. Yeah. Ben Higgins, Colne, and Ben Johnson at Colne, and Greg Mail at Church. Some of the times they battered us. That 100 and whatever, who has it got? 150 or whatever he got. Higgs in that semi-final. That was particularly painful.
Yeah, and then the Bevan one at.
And
he got a lot of runs.
Can you remember the Bevan one, Jez? Because we had Cameron that year, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
And staunchly sort of parochial, weren't we? We didn't really like other sides, did we? You know, there was better sides we got on with a little bit better, and we never mixed with them before a game or not. And Cameron and Michael Bevan were warming each other up, bowling at each other. We're just looking at, what are they doing? What are they doing?
Yeah, what is good. Can you remember? I don't know if we'll get this story right, Chris. And again, Stan would probably be better off telling it than I would at Ronstall away when Bevan got the 160 odd. Phil, you know, bless his soul, dropped him on about 7 something.
Yeah.
And I was captain. It's on an absolute flat track at Rottenstall. A short boundary as well. Ryan Esker's playing, and if I remember rightly, I haven't got the scorecard up. And Ryan's bowling okay, but I'm just trying to change things around. Bevan is just smashing us everywhere. And Stan came up to me with about 10 overs to spare and said, Jez, listen, because Stan was one of these players, when things were going tough, it wouldn't help you. He'd hide. You know, he's one of your senior players. I'm running up my own backside. I don't know whether I'm to bowl, whether I should bowl or I shouldn't bowl. Should I bring my brother on? Should I carry on? I'm getting smashed all over. Right, it's better me getting smashed than anyone else because he will smash everyone. And Stan came up to me, Jez, do you mind me giving you a bit of advice? And I'm steam coming out my ears. I said, what, Stan? What do you want? Well, I said, you've said nothing all the game. Why are you going on Sunday side? You want to ask, give us some advice now? There's only 12 overs to go. And I'm proper grumpy. He said, why don't you try a bit of off-spin? Get Blez to bowl off-spin at him. Off, down there and go. Fantastic. We nearly won that.
You remember that day was, you know, like, I know Stanley mentioned it in the last podcast about that being the record score, weren't it? 319.
Yeah.
Gary bollocking young Stanley for saying that Nelson didn't eclipse that score. But we were in with a chance of winning that game.
We were.
We got 260. Cameron got 100. I got 70, and started. You know, we were in with a chance of winning the game. We were on 250, I think, for 2. Me and Cameron batting 3 and 4, and we were in with a chance of winning the game. Then Cameron got out, and because it had gone for 300, and we'd be fetching the ball, and we got 200. It started getting dark. It were about 8 o'clock at this time. We'd had to fang that many balls, and it got pitch black, and we couldn't. We still had about 6 or 7 overs left, and we needed 60, and you didn't get 60 off 6 overs in them days. But you know, we still had a chance of winning, and it got pitch black. I got out. I skied one to deep mid-wicket and got caught off Kez. And then I can remember Ryan batting, and he couldn't see. So somebody were bowling at Ryan, he just couldn't see him.
Yeah.
We ended up only 270, something like that. But it was one of the highest aggregates ever. Obviously, they won the 319, which was the highest score, and we got 270.
Yeah, it was. Can you remember why our innings went on and on and on? And again, I've got a gloomy stat. Bob, he was fielding at third man, and then ended up full field at third man at the other end.
Gordon, send Morehouse to save the house.